Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight we are covering 1983 Sudden Impact, the fourth in the Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry series. I have with me the man from the great Midwest, RDV. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I am doing good. It's a little nippy outside up here in northern woods.
Well, it's not down here in Central Florida, and I got to tell you, broadcasting from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida, I have to say, having you on the set feed, I hope the signal doesn't go out, but if it does, I want to visualize in my head that you somehow fell a great deal of height into like a Ferris wheel and got impaled by a unicorn, because that's how this movie ends. And of course, with Sudden Impact, that's an apropos name for the ending, but it's a pretty interesting film here in the series, because to me, there's a lot of debate between whether the third one's really good or just kind of really off the kilter. But I think there's a lot to like in this film, but there's also a lot to dislike as well. And I remember seeing it as a young teenager, and I will tell you this. At the time of seeing it, everyone went apeshit, because I think this movie, directed by Clint Eastwood, struck a good balance of some humor in it that probably was atypical, meaning the dog Meathead and a few lines. There are some great lines in here, and there's some great scenes you and I have talked about before.
Yeah.
The action chases. There's a foot chase in here that I liked, but it's also a very long movie, about 2 hours long, and some people hated Sondra Locke in this film. And as a kid, I had no idea what was going on with their relationship, but it was impossible not to know that Sondra Locke and Clint Eastwood were tied to the hip for a great deal of time there, from earlier movies up until now. So I think it's a fun movie. I don't know how good it is compared to the others, but I do enjoy watching it. I think it gives you enough of what you want, and it makes it a bit of a popcorn film, but I don't feel like it's very menacing or dark like there might have been a hint in a couple of these films too. But overall, I like it and I enjoy it, and I don't think it's that bad. What's your initial take on this film?
As I've learned watching these, this is my second time watching through all the movies again. You can tell a pattern as the main story plot gets more and more ridiculous. Yeah. But the side stories, like the robberies, everything else, his interaction with the cops, the criminals, that is still spot on good. Goes to a guy's like his daughter's wedding, gives a guy a heart attack. This basically bullshitting. So he got evidence on him. The guy panics, has a heart attack, falls over, then he leaves. He's like, and the girl, he says the host, she's like, oh, she asks like, what happened? He's like, oh, some guy clutched his heart after he saw the bill, and he hands it to the envelope he had. You're showing the guy. It's just blank piece of paper in there.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point that I think is pretty interesting that I didn't really think of in the other films. Yes, it follows the same Dirty Harry template, but here it feels like this movie has a lot of collection of really, really great Dirty Harry scenes.
Yeah.
But then there's a movie involved with what's really going on. And of course, is Sondra Locke's character, who about 10 years earlier, her and her sister were raped by a group of people, and it's a bit brutal with what you get in here. And she is going around and she is taking out revenge, and can't argue with that in a way. And to me, it makes sense, and it can be really dark, but then you put it opposite him getting a dog from his friend, who's the same character that played the militant in the last movie, played the pimp with the souped out pimp mobile in the other movie before, and he played the guy wanting to know if he had all that. I loved seeing him in here. I kind of popped for that. So like I say, I think they did some smart things in here, but I agree with you. I think individual scenes are better than the movie as a collection there too. Let's just kind of start from the beginning, and just kind of go through some things that kind of come to mind and all that. First of all, when the initial plot comes on and you start hearing the music and the credits rolling, I'm immediately drawn to the fact, okay, did Layla Schifrin get involved in this again? Because he hadn't been, he is, but it's a very funky, jazzy choice to it. But I will tell you this, I've joked before that you have a lot of sexy sax in 80s films. You definitely have that here. You have that kind of mixed in, so it's kind of all over the place, but it's very 80s-ish. And also you get a lot of bad guys wearing the members only jackets, I think is great too. But I immediately went, okay, they've really put this into an 80s film, because the films we saw were 70s films. But somehow I do think that they kind of made this work for the 80s. That may not mean much to you being the young 30-something guy, but as the kid of the 80s, to me and the older people that have watched this, I think they would agree too. What did you think of how this opened up with
Well, I gotta say, this has been 7 years since the last film.
Yes.
So 83, last one was 76. So A little things change, but the music that you still get you can tell it's a Dirty Harry movie by the intro. All the way through the beginning, I said like the way it starts off, it's just it starts off with a court case. You're like, what's going on here? And then the punks get off scot free because they're trying to show it, basically establishing even for those who don't know that hey, Callahan does things not necessarily by the books, and then you see how the judge. Oh man, I wanted to punch that little smart judge.
Yeah.
And I'm like. And she's like, case dismissed because inspector doesn't know how to, enforce the law, the legal search. I'm thinking like, and I love how that comes back to like, he makes a rebuttal when he's at the coffee shop later on. But before we get to that, the three guys get off, or the one guy gets off, because there's not enough evidence because the gun was found in the legal search, so they can't prove anything. They go into the elevator. He gets in the elevator with them, and then the guy starts, mouthing off to him. Harry pulls him over, just looking out, and just basically gives him the whole line about how he's dog shit. It's like, you have three choices. You can blow in the wind. You can just just sit there in the grass, someone step on you, or
dry up. I think is the other one.
Yeah, and he's like I don't care. He's like he basically scares the crap out of the guy, So those kids, and you don't see them for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
So after that, but he goes to get his coffee at the diner, and you see her, and this is interesting too, because if you've never seen a scene before, you're watching for the first time, you're like, why is this woman pouring so much salt, or not salt, but sugar into his coffee? So it's just in there. You see these guys standing around, shady characters. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is be a robbery scene. It's see the goons. And he leaves and quickly, he goes to take a sip of his coffee. He's like, what the heck is this crap? Spits it out. I love the spit take. I know. And then he turns around and sees it's closed. So he already knew what's going on right away. So, and I love it. The guy's in there. He's like, they don't expect, when he shows up, they're like, holy crap. Like, where'd he come from? Man, he just appears right there coming out of the back. And this is one of the, he shoots all four guys. Except the one of the guys wasn't killed. He wasn't a kill shot. He got a shot in the shoulder. He grabs a waitress, and tries to put a gun, and he walks up, and just cocks his gun. The guy's making him right in the guy's face, and he's like, "Go ahead, make my day." And that's still one of the most famous quotes we have in here. So we got, do you feel lucky? And then so this is when we think of Dirty Harry, those are the two main quotes. So we get that scene right away.
Yes,
but I
think it's one of the better scenes too.
But even after that quote, after the guy surrenders, the cop comes. He's like, "Here, call it so and so at the D's office, and tell him I got a psychic feeling."
Yeah, it's a reference from earlier when they talked about that. There's little things like that maybe if you're younger or haven't seen it that you might miss. So I think it's pretty tight because like we see Sondra Locke's character making out with a guy, in view of the Golden Gate Bridge at night. Of course, she takes the gun, shoots him in the head, in both heads. I'll just simply say that. It's very brutal. And she walks to a little corner and then leaves. And then when he's investigating it, he walks the exact same spot. So there's little shots like that, directorially speaking, that I thought were pretty neat. I went, oh, I missed that as a kid. Now we'll see this. Yes, it's the same template. So if you've watched all these films, and I can only imagine if you were older at the time in the 80s and grew up watching these, that you go, okay, I know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, watching as a kid, everyone was cheering because he's doing the stuff that should be done. But of course, we don't get too much of the political and what some might say fascist element of him as far as doing things by the book, because obviously if he didn't, he wouldn't be on the force, and it's just a lot of yelling and barking. But again, 40, 50 years ago, you're seeing how this has already been in the system and how he is been said to be the dinosaur where this kind of thing's not going the right direction. There's definitely a very strong feminist angle in these films here. Now we're getting to where it's more about the justice system and how it fails women and men and everybody in general. But other than something with the ending, it doesn't really have that great paranoid feel to it that we got in some of the earlier films.
It's funny that you say that, because they even do mention in the film that he's a constant in a changing world.
Yes.
So he's aging out. His kind of cop, which I think is BS. We need that kind of cop today.
Well, one of the things too that made this kind of dated in terms of 80s, I mentioned members only jackets, is I forgot some of the lingo that got used a lot because we don't hear them that often today. Everyone always thinks that the 80s and they think like, oh my God, totally. And the Valley Girl stuff, especially, like awesome and like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Valley Girl and whatnot. But the stuff that was spoken here in the hood in Pine Hills was like sucker and fool and all that kind of stuff that people
It's like
might think of like as Mr. T saying, but you get some of
shafts.
that in here, and I think that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But just the look on his face, because obviously he's aged here, and it's
Oh yeah.
noticeable, even though he looks great for his age, no matter what age, he's always a fit guy. But when he says, when he has that line, I think it's the best part where he goes, well, we're not just going to let you walk out of here. And the guy's like, who, sucker? Which I'm laughing. He's like, well, Smith and Weston and me. And as a kid, I didn't really know the whole gun thing and holster, so I
Yeah.
totally missed how he was putting the paper down. It's just the way it's shot. You don't get movies that are set up for this. And some people call that exploitive. Some people call that cheese. It's not cheese because they know exactly what you want and they're delivering it. Cheese would be kind of like a
Yeah.
wink and a nod to
Yeah.
the person watching it, which we're not getting in this film.
No. I think Clint was actually in his 50s in this.
Yes, he was.
He had to
Yes.
been like
Early
early
50s, maybe 50,
early,
52.
yeah, early and mid. So you can definitely tell because for those who watch the Western, you can tell his hair color changes real fast, and his demeanor and stuff. But yeah, this I thought this movie was okay for what it was. The bad part is that I watched it before, so as soon as I started watching, I remembered everything. So it's not like one of those movies you can watch it and you forget it, and then you're able to watch it again because you're like, you may remember a few things, but I remembered every single thing that's going through here.
Right.
But that's not necessarily bad though, because it's bad for me because of rewatchability. I'm not, because this is one of my films that I'm a fan of, but I always remember this film being the one with the new gun.
Yes.
And then the guy, like you said, the actor who's basically comes in, he's played the pimp, he's played all that stuff, plays his buddy, asks him about the gun, and he's like, yeah, this is like, it's like fingerprints. This one does blow the whole entire hand off. It's like it's like the lead fingerprints. It is because it's the 44 Magnum, with the auto clip. Up to this point in the past movies, he's been using the revolver.
Yeah.
And even in this movie, he used a revolver in the earlier scenes. Now so he brings that automatic gun into play later on. I said the Dirty Harry movies were always like for the 44 Magnum, Smith and Weapons. He's like, and I love I love he says that, like even at the diner scene, he's like, who wants, like, my friends Smith and Wesson and me. It's like, so it's so, and most people say that, like, well, Dirty Harry's like, oh, it's promoting guns. I'm like, well, yeah, guns are a tool. They're self-defense, so, and people,
22 is not gonna do the job here in a situation like that.
22 will maybe wound you, but it won't. He said 22 will wound you. 44 will blow a hole through you. What would you rather have? And with people nowadays, people wearing Kevlar, even back then, 44 will go into a Kevlar pretty good. It'll hurt.
Well, a couple things too that make this an '80s movie that stand out here, and something I'm disappointed in. I wanted to touch on. I talked about the language a little bit here. There's a scene where we see Sondra's character. She's an artist, so obviously she's doing well. That gives her the means to go to this really small town where everything happened because she's restoring a project where she had been raped, her and her sister, and so we discover this along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's what I think is a neat scene because she's leaving San Francisco and she's going to a small little town. Which you always think of Brazil because of San Paulo, or whatever they call it. And she's driving and she's parking at a red light or stopping at a red light, and these punks kind of come up and they're all like, whatever. And the dude's got the sleeveless thing and the gloves and all the whole 80s thing. And it's like, yeah, whatever. And these guys aren't all tatted up or tattooed and pierced like you would see them today, but they're still punks, right? And they're talking stuff to her, and she just does this, like, come here. And the one guy says something and she makes a comment, and I thought, oh, this is pretty good. I kind of liked how she was just giving it back to him, because we don't really see that a lot where people are standing up to punks and hooligans and that sort of thing too, because frankly these kids should be in school. They've got nothing better to do. They should be doing their homework, and they got owned here by this woman that would have shot them all. And frankly, I almost thought, God, is she going to run over them or something? And it's not
Mhm.
played for laughs. I did like that. But the thing I didn't like about this film, generally speaking, is that we don't have San Francisco really being a character anymore, because they go to the small town. And I think it was the rest of the
Yeah,
town
because he
is
got
in Santa Cruz. Yeah, because he got sent, he got kicked off, but then he got put back on to
yeah.
follow some guy, and so that's how he conveniently meets her. And that's how that there's a lot of conveniences in these films. Let's just kind of ignore that. It's an easy thing, but it
It's
works, you know. But I kind of miss San Francisco and the way they'd film it and choose different locations. I was really
oh
gonna
yeah.
enjoy looking for it. And they don't have it here.
The first movie was with the helicopter scene over the whole entire city, the rooftops and stuff, and then
Yep.
even the second movie, you saw more stuff with the Magnum Force driving around. Not much for scenery in this movie. It's mainly like restaurants and like buildings and all workplaces. But yeah, outdoor scenery, not much.
Yeah, and the bad dudes has they
If
have
you want,
facial hair. By facial hair, I mean glorious mustaches, and that was a thing in the '80s too. You know, you were clean shaven for the most part. Mutton chops were gone by this point, but you definitely had different levels of mustache, and that's definitely prevalent. And in the audience, people popped hard when he was being chased by the hitman, and they all shot up the dumpster. But he was actually another thing, and he blows
yeah.
them all away. You know, you're right. If that happened today and that was caught on CCTV, that cop would probably get sued and whatever.
Oh
But
yeah.
I mean, back then it was like, yeah, these punks deserve it. They get it.
Unnecessary force, because even criminals shooting a gun at you have a rights, right? Ugh. But yeah, if you want to watch more scenery about San Francisco, check out our other films we did with Chuck Norris. Cannons. We did some reviews on here, and all those movies, a lot of scenery with San Francisco. So
that's a beautiful watch. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. Obviously, he's scheduled to go to this town now and follow up on one of the victims that got murdered. And he meets a guy that's the small town sheriff, who, of course, doesn't like him because he's a big city detective or whatever. And it's interesting. What I thought was really cool here, but it's also a little bit disappointing, is I was really hoping his partner, who's not doesn't really act like a partner in here.
yeah.
I thought, you know, him sneaking up behind him and having a conversation was kind of fun. It's like a buddy thing, and he just did him a favor. And except for dying, which is what happens, he was wearing a really cool turtleneck. I kind of thought, you know, that, like I say, they're changing some of the way they're doing things here. And when he gets to this town and his buddy hooked him up with Meathead the dog, I started laughing. And that's when I think a lot of people in the audience where I went to went, yes, this isn't like going to be a serious Dirty Harry. This is going to be a fun one. And in a way, saying that, that sounds disappointing. But like I said, this is an 80s movie. You could take any movie and you could put an 80s filter on it, and it'll be great, especially if there's a montage and other 80s type filter things. That's why, in a way, I almost don't think of this as a Dirty Harry film. It's a film in the 1980s that has Dirty Harry in it because there's some great scenes, but it's just not like the others.
I've always looked at it basically being a Sondra Locke movie with Dirty Harry starring it. No.
Here's the thing about Sondra Locke. I will say this. I don't mind her performance. Some people say she cannot act. Some people say she's a great actress. I think she's fine in here. She fits the role perfectly. But I don't have any reason to root for her or kill her. Yes, it was a bad thing that happened to her, and I feel bad.
I don't.
But we all know Dirty Harry. We're rooting for him. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing is, I don't promote revenge. Yeah, her sister was raped. Her sister's still alive. You know, she's traumatized. You know, she's in a mental fugue state where she can't come out yet. But her going and just taking vengeance against these guys. She kind of went to Harry, but I understand she didn't know Harry. But the fact that it irks me is the fact that Harry let her off at the end after they kill everybody, and he's like, and he's basically the cop is like, oh, you sure the killing's done? He's like, yeah, it's done, it's over.
Well, we'll talk about that here.
I guess that's the only part I don't like about the whole Sondra Locke thing, you know. I mean, because it's like Harry saying, like, you know, it's okay to kill a criminal.
Let's save it. let's save it.
I don't
Let's save it for that because we're going to disagree on that.
know.
I think big time. When he gets to the small town, though, there is a foot chase, and I've told you I've always loved the foot chases that they have here. They're
Yeah.
intimate. They show off the location you're in. Nothing beats running past a bunch of people on the sidewalk and knocking some groceries out of their paper bag hands. Which, you know, if somebody should do that in film today and just knock out the double bag plastic ones that people have every day, or basically from where they're getting the order pickup, because nothing beats a foot chase with produce rolling around. And this is before they started driving through glass shields that conveniently would be going across the street. And I'll just stop there before it gets too 80s crazy. But it's interesting because when he gets to the small little apartment room that he's in, and he's got the dog in there, dog's peeing and farting on him. It's like instant classic. You're like Dirty Harry with a dog. I mean, this gives you the warm fuzzies, doesn't it? I know it does me.
Yeah. Did you notice this? Did you also? I want to point out. Did you notice this movie had a lot of nighttime scenes?
It did.
A lot.
It did.
And I think they did that to help make her character more sinister. Sondra Locke's character. That's the reason I can think of why.
Well, I agree, and she's not on the screen a lot, which is helpful because.
But when she is, though, it
Yes.
really makes her more deranged.
I agree. And the thing too with Harry walking around in this town is like he's rotating through these sweet, creamy, leathery jackets. And I don't know what they are, but his sunglass game is extremely strong in here because when you see him standing over the body early on, you're like, what the hell glasses are those? I don't know, Oakley's, but they're designer.
Rob, do you have a man crush?
No, but I
these
handle the
jackets?
fashion. You handle the cars and the guns. I handle the fashion when we do these things, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're listening, you know, the fans out there that listen to our Twin Peaks review, we're halfway through season 3 now, episode by episode. Professor Book's not covering. Big Ed's got this great buttery leather jacket. It's like a light tannish kind, and I'm going, who brings 5 leather jackets with them when they're going to work? You know, you bring one maybe in a turtleneck, right? But whoever did his wardrobe did a great job too. I loved it a lot. I gotta say this: in the early '80s, especially when they got 3 channels here in the hood, maybe 4 if our antennas were working, we would get we would get the Benny Hill show from the BBC or whatever it was over there in Britain, and so that was always a big deal watching Benny Hill. And we would get Doctor Who if we were lucky. And that was about it. But as far as sketch comedy goes, that still wasn't a huge thing. Saturday Night Live was a thing for a few years, but every year people say if you watched it from the beginning, like I did and a few other fans of the Xtreme Movie Show, it went down every year in terms of quality. But there was a show on HBO called Not Necessarily the News that had a bunch of bit players on it. And the lady that plays I think she's supposed to be a dyke or a lesbian, or but she's referred to as a dyke in here. But even though she's the one that did the pulling that got Sondra Locke when she was younger and her sister and got her raped. She plays to me. I don't know if she's bisexual here because she comes on to the one bad dude, right? But she plays a character, and it's really kind of dark and over top, very butch, and I think she does a great job in here too. Because when Harry goes to basically the only bar in town, and she starts nuzzling up to him over like that, he ends up kicking her in the butt, and then later on, of course, he punches her in her face, which I thought was kind of funny. But I just wanted to point her out because she was on Not Necessarily News early on, and she did a great job in here of just being that kind of bitch. But at the same time, she's the first one to notice in her group of people. And again, this is 10 years ago, high on drugs and alcohol. She's starting to realize, holy crap, we're all getting kind of whacked. And she starts to tell the other people, and they don't even want to acknowledge her. And so I thought that was a nice little way to interject her into it.
Yeah, she felt like, it was her, and she's like the only sister with a bunch of brothers. And she's a smart one. They're all idiots, basically has to deal with them.
Yep.
She, so I get that kind of sense, like the mama bear sense, from her.
Yeah, agreed. She's the mother hen of the group.
She's the evil, sadistic, she
cares in her own way for the group.
Yeah. But just going through this, like, there's a scene where she's in the hardware store with that other cop, and he's asked her questions, and then she grabs his belt by his crotch, pulls it up, kind of tries to like intimidate him. And then she's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'm packing here. I got my own piece." It's kind of. I'm like, just basically trying to. The whole point was just basically establish her dominance over like this, like Richie Cunningham looking cop. So yeah, she does come out very butch in this, but like yeah, like that's the good thing about this. You can still root for Harry in this because you can root for good guys because the bad people get what's coming to them. Whether it's a punch in the face or a guts shot, or or a unicorn.
Well, she does have another killed list in broad daylight with one of the dudes, and things start picking up because Harry goes back to his place, and Meathead sniffing at the door next to him, and he's
Yeah,
like, "What are you doing?" Because he acts like he doesn't care about the dog, but one of the assassins we saw earlier pops his head out, and they get in a shootout, and he kills him. He's like, "Well, I guess I owe you one."
he gets rid of his leather jacket and switches it up for like a parka jacket or something. That's
Yeah, I don't know if that was editing or what, because then he's back to the creamy buttery one there when he's in the office. One of the guys he saved during the foot chase with the shootout kind of helps him out a little bit. I thought, okay, this guy's gonna die, but he doesn't. But he helps him out.
Even at the end though, all the way to the end, when he gets his gun, the one they showed before. It's said, I always remember this movie for that gun because it's in the automatic. Because I'm like, wow, he's not carrying the Magnum, just regular bullets loading up the revolver. No, he's using a clip this time. I'm like, oh, I kind of like revolvers more than I really like the clips.
Yeah.
Maybe because we're old school cowboys. It just they look cooler. You can spin them and all that stuff. You can do trick shooting. So yeah, he goes back to he gets rid of his leather jacket because he's hanging out with her, and then he goes to help rescue her or stop her from killing more people, try to put an end to all this because he figures everything out that she's the one that's going around doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He has that other jacket on, and I noticed that I was like, wow, it almost looks like your jacket you would get from the 80s. No more leather. He's in San Francisco. Let's put on a 80s fashion sense jacket now.
Yeah, it's so obvious if those things pop out to you, but not to everybody. But it's one of those things where it's like once they get to this town, it just feels like the movie slows down a lot.
It does, and that's the thing. It's like that's another thing about this movie is just that Mega Force had its slow parts, but it was still really good when it wasn't slow. It was great. This, I don't know, the whole Sondra Locke thing. I understand she's getting revenge, but it's like I've seen this Pony and Dance before. It was kind of boring to me.
Well, it's very deliberate. I can see where it seems that way because when you think about it out loud, she gets another kill under her belt, right? And he's investigating stuff go on, and he catches her license plate there. But then the stakes rise, and we realize we're towards the end because his partner comes to visit him, and he gets killed. But then all I'm going to say is they injure the dog. I don't want to really describe it because it really pissed me off a lot. And I was like, yeah, that's a little unnecessary for the fact that he's like, well, do you want him? And he would say swell about stuff. And there was almost like some inhumor in this film, despite the severity of her storyline, and kind of clashes a little bit. But anybody watching this could see a mile away that the small town cop guy or a sheriff of this town who doesn't like him, wants to run him off, is somehow involved. And it turns out his son was involved in the rape, but then felt so guilty. He himself was like in a few stayed, and she goes to, kill this last guy. And that's when things kind of up the ante because she ends up basically with that guy shot. The last bad dude comes from Vegas, and they end up at the pier where she's supposed to be doing her little restoration project, you will. In other words, repairing her past, the analogy as it were. And Harry doesn't do much other than have a great little shot of the light behind him on the pier with the gun you're talking about there in full view. And I'm like, that is so 80s, where we pose before we start doing something. And again, it's so blatant. It's not that it's bad, but it's just very 80s. Like he's standing there, it's just a silhouette and all that. And this bad guy, I didn't look him up, but I swear he's been another crap in the 80s too. He's not the high level bad guy like a Michael Cavanaugh or others we'll talk about more. But I was a little disappointed in this ending because he kind of does the make my day thing, and he's got her, and it's a nice shot to your point, which Dusk would have been better, I think, because it's hard to watch.
There's this guy who plays Threkus. Threkus is there. I'm looking it up right now. He was in Godfather Part 2. Played by Michael Vincent Gazel.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, so let's talk about the ending, though.
Well, then the other guy is best known for his prisoner, Clarence Angel from the Escape from Alcatraz.
That might be what I'm thinking.
And any which way you can.
Well, we'll talk some about those later, especially with Sondra. No, you said you didn't really like what happens in the ending. And the ending is something I want to discuss with you because I felt like we were different on it. But basically, they end up going up the Ferris wheel. The guy ends up getting shot, whatever. He ends up falling down, dies or whatever. And she's like, well, so what's next? Because they're getting the body out or like that. And the cop that he'd helped save basically is like, oh, we found the gun on him, and then that way, they're just sitting there. It's convenient.
Yeah.
He looks and he says to him, he goes, well, if you run a ballistics and check it, I think you'll find it's a match. And he's like, so that's it? I mean, that was a very easy piece of writing. It's like, I think you'll find that it will be. So she's like, well, that's it. And it pretty much ends. I have no problem with what happened there. Because let's face it, he's supposed to be a bit of a loner guy, not supposed to have a girlfriend. So I don't have a problem with Crazy hooking up with Crazy, which is what happened here.
Yeah.
They're not lovey-dovey, and I don't believe we see her in the next film. Like it's not a continuing character. It's just the way it ends. But you sound like you really didn't like the message or something.
Him feeling sorry for someone who just killed 5 people. I understand that her sister was raped, but she still murdered people. There's the law, so it's Harry bending the law again, and I don't want Harry bending the law because it's where do you draw the line then? Once you cross the line,
and you bring up a good point with that because I always joke about T.J. Hooker, even though I was always serious about wanting to cover it here, because by the 80s, cops are completely lampooned. They're made fun of.
Police Academy and all that stuff,
And I don't know what happened because in the 70s you felt like with Chips and Beretta and detectives like Cannon and stuff.
Chips started off good and then it got really hokey.
Well, but that's the whole thing is that in the 80s, by the 80s, you definitely had this thing where cops were ridiculed basically and lampooned, and Dirty Harry, had been around for so long. To kind of bend the rules, you kind of go, well, see, he's kind of, being a vigilante or a bad guy. And of course, the Death Wish movies were still popular. There's other vigilante stuff going on. I just understand that he allowed her to get away with it. And the reason why I don't have a problem with it is because, he understood that what she did wasn't right, but he understands the pain. There's nothing he can really do about it. But I think he just basically was like, well, I'm done here, and that's going to be it. And then part of me goes, well, what is he supposed to do? And I understand you're saying that it shouldn't, but this is where the thing is, this is pretty much the last serious thing that a cop gets away with. Even though the Equalizer is a show I love, you can say there's a bit of vigilantism in there. And I know that younger people today, looking back on 80 shows and reviewing them, kind of have a sense of, oh, they really glorify the violence. They're so pro-gun. They're so whatever. And I'm not really trying to get so political so much as to say, well, no, that's really not what they're saying. And what's he supposed to do? How can he really prove to everybody that she did all the murdering? He really can't. I'm not saying he should or he shouldn't, but I get it. It makes sense to me, But it definitely does leave it open for what you're saying. So I really can't argue.
I mean, if they connect the guy that he's the guys that raped, her sister. All they did is basically find out more about who her sister is, and she's got raped. You could connect the evidence, you could probably build a case. Now, we've seen though that Harry doesn't really know how to build a case, so through their legal searches and all that stuff. But I don't know. I just don't want him. He skirts the line, but I don't want him crossing the line. That's the thing that I don't like about that. Because
did he cross the line?
Well, he said he knows that she's the killer and she's going this, but he's going on her word because he's basically whipped.
Eric giving me some shit in channel about the Equalizer with slang. You can go fuck yourself, Eric, because we know that's not true, you bastard. I know you're trolling me, so I'll say that with a smile. No, Robert Woodard, who has been around a long time, Wicker Man, the original one with Rod Stewart's squeeze at the time, who would go on to play one of the worst Bond ladies of Britt England or whatever her name is. Rod Stewart's squeeze in the video Tonight's Night. It's a little disappointing that happened because Scaramanga was such a great villain. But however, this is not the Bond review, which we're getting ready to drop on Her Majesty's Secret Service here soon, so check that out too. But yeah, let's talk. Oh, go ahead. before we finish up?
I was just gonna say, with now today's we do with cops, we're gonna have Dirty Harriet. That's gonna be the next thing.
Well, it's
Because we look at, because you said even today, like, you're talking about how cops are basically made a joke in the 80s, still today, Brooklyn 911 and all that stuff, they cops, let's be cops. There's all it is basically cop movies that are basically there, or TV series that just make fun of cops. They're complete jokes, because
I would maintain it's the system that they're in, because people have rooted for Harry in spite of the crap he had to deal with, or probably because of that, like all this government nonsense. He's doing the right thing. He's not trying to, be a vigilante, but he's trying to get results. And you definitely had a lot more leeway back then to do.
I don't think you'll ever know. I don't think you'll ever get a serious cop movie like this anymore in today's. No, the last one we saw was the reboot with Bruce Willis doing Death Wish. But he wasn't a cop. He was doing the same thing.
A little tongue in cheek. It felt like to
me.
Yeah,
a little bit. But that's the closest you're going to get to this stuff anymore, because they're trying to. Because killing's bad, unless it's like Expendables, old guys, seniors shooting guns.
Well, I mean, there's an audience for it, and I don't think it's for older people. Oh. Martial arts films are really great. It's the only place that you can have 120-pound people, ninja style, kicking the hell out of everybody. Yes, that originated in the 80s, maybe the 70s if you watch Golden Harvest and Shaw films and all that. But in a movie like this, it really is about the character, and I maintain that's number one. It's not the fact that he's a cop. It's the fact that he has a certain kind of moral code that we see in action, and we're not told what it is. We see how people respond to him. It's not a very dialogue-heavy type of template. So yes, it's the same stupid movie we've had for four times, but it works because we care about the character. Now, do all films have to be character-based? No. But the point is we understand them. There may be some elements that we go, we almost want to root for him, or at least into some of the situations he's in. And I think, again, the genius of this film is that he kind of 80s-fied it by making it a bit fun, by throwing in the dog, a few lines in here. Yep. The music I thought was good, but it wasn't spectacular like the first couple. It was a decent 80s film that has Dirty Harry in it. And I'll be curious to see what it is when we talk about the next one, because I had not seen this film since it was out. So it's been almost 40 years. And it's the same thing with the next one, which I just go, oh, this is the one with Jim Carrey? And I feel really disappointed having to say that. And I love me some Jim Carrey, but we're not there yet. So
Sudden Impact is 38 years.
God, that's amazing to say that. All right, final thoughts about the film.
Final thoughts. Give it at least a 1-through watch. Second time through for me was a kind of a snooze towards the end. A lot of the action, like I said, it's basically the bank scene, not a bank scene, but the diner scene, courtroom, and the wedding scene. Yeah, so So whenever he's able to just basically do anything and focus on the major plot, it's good for me. And we get to see the new automatic, 44 Magnum, the auto clip. Which to me is so hokey, because I'm like, this you don't need that. I know you're trying to sell the gun. And it's like, no. What is now my thing is, the next movie gonna have a different gun?
I think Liam Neeson's in it too as well, because I remember I knew about from Excalibur, but then when he did, I think it was in '89 or '90 Darkman, that's when his stock blew up before he found a second career. 20 years later with the Taken films and all that. But I agree with you. If you like Dirty Harry, obviously you're going to watch this. It's hard to really rank where this one goes, because right now I probably have to say out of the four, it's the worst. But it's enjoyable and it's fun.
I would say 3 and 4 are tied, and then
I don't like ties.
For third place, yeah.
Ties means you don't have a loser. I can't go with that. You have to rank, and so right now, if I had to, just off the top of my head, I'd go, yeah, this is probably number 4 for me, because the other 3 were pretty good in certain aspects. There was nothing singularly unique about this other than it was an 80s film, and we'll see how much that holds up in '88, because late 80s is different than early 80s. You dig, sucker?
now I'm really curious to see if that guy's gonna come back and it's a different role again.
Spoiler, I think he's his partner in the next film. Well, I may be wrong about that, or maybe this was the last thing. I'm not sure. Maybe he's not in the next one at all. Maybe this was his partner film, and that's it. But it was neat to see him too. Yeah, decent film. It was a lot of fun. It was a very big film. It was one that was just great to see, and it came out on my birthday in 1983. So I noticed. I went, oh, bam! I popped for that. So it has a little special place in my heart. So went from a boy to a man watching this film, and hence the love of dogs. There you go.
Did you get an automatic 44 Magnum for your birthday?
I got that next to the coal in the stocking too, and a tangerine in it because in Florida the freezes came in '83 and destroyed everything and moved them all south.
You know what? Real men like coal because then you can use it to warm up.
That's if they're still on the ground 6 months of the year, like where you live, but not here in sunny Central Florida, where it was a balmy 64 today.
Coal was worth money back then.
There you go.
It's worth more now because we don't use it anymore.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Sudden Impact 1983, the fourth in the Dirty Harry films. Thank you for joining and watching us, sharing it out, retweeting, and all that too. These are a lot of fun and popular. We're going to do the fifth one next week. Also, I wanted to mention too, we started using the community tab that we just got access to. We put out a poll. It looks like unofficially it's a tie between The Ghost in the Darkness and Falling Down from Michael Douglas movie that we're going to be doing on Tuesday night. Plus, we're going to have a Thanksgiving surprise stream at 6 o'clock right before we go live for the 7 one. So stick around for both of that. You will see that being tweeted out. Yep. If you've got some votes for either one, do it. My heart is leaning towards Falling Down because it's a lot of fun, but Ghost in the Darkness is pretty solid too.
I've seen Falling Down multiple times. Ghost in the Darkness I've seen twice, and it's been a while. So I just remember the lions.
Yeah, and this is a situation where we go, let's let the fans decide.
Yep. Yeah. So, but since we're tied, if by Tuesday, if they're still tied, we'll just do both movies. You know, we'll do one this week and then the one the following week.
That may be true. Yeah. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for listening and everything else. Start a Facebook page called Xtreme Movie Show if you're new to that or want to join there. We just put that out there to get some more traction. Like I say, I appreciate the shout outs that we're getting for it. It really helps us out as we grow towards getting subscribers. We're marching down there. So have a good holiday, everybody. If you're not going to be here by Thanksgiving or however you choose to celebrate it, otherwise we'll see you guys there on Tuesday night. Have a good night. And for RDV and everybody involved here at the Xtreme Movie Show, stay extreme.
Later, guys.